The young blind Apache woman was forced by her father to marry a cowboy. When she opened her eyes, unexpected. Naya was born in a quiet Apache village, surrounded by the endless stretches of desert and the soft, green hills that touched the sky. From the moment she opened her eyes, it seemed the world had decided she would see it differently. Naya was blind, and though she could not see the colors of the sky or the shapes of the mountains, she experienced life in a way that made her heart and mind sharper than most. She could feel the warmth of the sun on her skin and hear the faint whispers of the wind moving through the trees. She could smell the sweet herbs her mother used for cooking, and she could sense the emotions of people around her, almost as if she could see with her soul. Her parents, Takoda and Ahioka, loved her deeply. Her mother was gentle, patient, and nurturing, while her father was strong, proud, and deeply traditional. Naya's blindness had never made her weaker in their eyes. Instead, her parents admired the way she adapted to life, navigating the village with grace and confidence. She moved through the sandy paths as if guided by invisible threads, remembering every crack in the earth and every sound that marked her way. By the time she was 10, she knew every corner of the village and every secret trail through the nearby hills. The villagers often admired her courage. Children played near her, sometimes guiding her hands to touch flowers, animals, or the soft soil of the gardens. Elders would tell stories in the evenings, and Naya always sat near the fire, listening, memorizing every word, every gesture, every emotion. Though she could not see, she understood people better than many who had the gift of sight. She laughed easily, and her laughter was known to echo in the village like a soft song. Her spirit was bright, and everyone loved her. But life in the village was not always gentle. Takoda, Naya's father, had always been careful about his daughter's future. He loved her, but he was also a man of his traditions. In his mind, a daughter's life was meant to secure her family's future, to connect families, and to follow the rules passed down by ancestors. Naya's blindness had not stopped him from thinking about what she would become, what kind of life she would have, and who would care for her when he and her mother were gone. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky became a canvas of soft purples and oranges, Takoda called Naya to the edge of their small home. The air smelled of smoke from the fire and the sweet herbs cooking inside. Naya felt the serious tone in her father's voice and wondered what he wanted to say. "Naya," he said, his voice steady but firm, "it is time for you to be married." Naya paused. Her mind raced. Married, she had never imagined this so soon. But she trusted her father, and she knew that in their world his word was law. "Father, but I cannot see and I do not know the world outside," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. Takoda placed a rough hand on her shoulder. "That is why I have arranged for you to marry a man who will care for you. He is a cowboy, a man who works hard and knows the ways of the land. He is strong and he will protect you. This is good for our family." Naya felt her heart sink. A stranger, a man she had never met, was to become her husband. The idea was frightening. The thought of leaving her village, leaving her mother's comforting presence, and stepping into a world she could not see filled her with fear. She wanted to protest, but deep down she knew resistance was dangerous. Takoda was firm, and in their culture a father's decision could not easily be challenged. Her mother, Ahioka, came to her side and touched her cheek gently. "My sweet Naya," she whispered, "I wish I could protect you from this, but you are stronger than you know. You will find your way as you always have." Naya tried to imagine the life ahead, but her mind could not form pictures of what awaited her. She only knew she would have to trust the man her father had chosen, and the journey she had never dreamed she would take. Nights became restless as she wondered about the cowboy, about the strange land, and about her own strength. She spent hours listening to the wind and the night animals, seeking comfort in the sounds that had always guided her. Soon, the day came when the cowboy Elias arrived. He was not like the figures in the stories her father had told. He was quiet, his voice soft yet commanding. Naya could hear his boots crunching the dirt, the creak of his horse, and the slight rustle of his coat. She extended her hands cautiously, feeling the solid presence of a stranger. Elias spoke gently, introducing himself, and Naya sensed a mixture of respect and curiosity in his voice. The journey to Elias' homestead was long and exhausting. Naya relied on her other senses to navigate, often reaching out to touch her surroundings and memorizing every change in the terrain. She felt the heat of the sun and the sharp cold of the nights. She heard the cries of distant animals, the rushing of small streams, and the faint whispers of the wind through the tall grasses. Elias guided her carefully, speaking in reassuring tones, but she could sense the distance in him, a man unfamiliar with her world, unsure of how to connect with someone like her. Along the way, Naya observed the world through her heightened senses. She could feel the rough bark of trees, the soft petals of wildflowers, and the uneven rocks under her feet. She learned the rhythm of the land, the patterns of the wind, and the signs that warned of danger. Despite the fear and uncertainty, she began to notice subtle kindnesses from Elias. How he adjusted the saddle for her comfort, how he waited patiently when she stumbled, and how he spoke to her as if she were an equal, not a burden. As the days passed, Naya began to understand that life outside her village would be different, and she would need courage and resilience. The world was bigger and harsher than she had ever imagined, but it was also filled with possibilities. She realized that her father's decision, though frightening and unwelcome, had placed her on a path she had never chosen, but one she could navigate if she trusted her instincts and inner strength. During evenings by the campfire, Naya listened to Elias' stories of the plains, of cattle drives, and of life on the open land. Though his world was foreign to her, she felt herself learning, understanding, and adapting. She discovered that even without sight, she could sense the landscape, the weather, and the moods of the people around her. Her blindness had made her attuned to details that others missed, and it became a strength she could rely on. By the time they reached Elias' homestead, Naya had learned to move with a quiet confidence. She had begun to trust not only her instincts, but also the presence of the man she had been forced to marry. Though fear and resentment lingered, she noticed moments of unexpected care. How Elias tended to her needs, how he respected her space, and how he spoke to her without judgment. Naya's first night in her new home was filled with uncertainty. She explored the rooms with careful hands, listening to the creak of the floorboards and the subtle echoes of her movements. She could smell the new scents of the household, the leather of the saddles, the fresh hay in the barn, and the aroma of cooking that was different from her mother's. Despite the strangeness, she felt a spark of curiosity and determination. She thought of her mother's words, "You are stronger than you know." Naya realized that she had survived blindness, the challenges of the village, and now a new life she had not chosen. She had adapted before, and she would adapt again. The fear remained, but alongside it grew courage, patience, and a quiet resolve to understand this new world and the man she now called her husband. By dawn, Naya stood outside, feeling the wind on her face and the wide expanse of the plains beneath her feet. She could not see the horizon, but she could feel the vastness of it in her heart. The journey ahead would be long and challenging, but she knew she had the inner strength to meet it. She was a young, blind Apache woman, forced into a life she had never imagined, yet within her lived a spirit unbroken, ready to face whatever came next. And so the story of Naya's journey began, not just a journey across the land, but a journey of self-discovery, courage, and the awakening of a strength she had never fully realized. The journey from the village to Elias' homestead was long and full of challenges. Naya had never traveled so far from the life she had known, and every step felt uncertain. The wind whipped across the plains, carrying dust and the sharp scent of dry earth. The sun burned hot during the day, and the nights grew cold and silent, broken only by the distant calls of coyotes or the rustle of small animals in the grass. Naya felt vulnerable, but she also felt alive in a way she had never experienced before. Every sound, smell, and touch became a guide, helping her navigate a world she could not see. Elias rode beside her, patient and quiet. He adjusted her saddle carefully, checking that she was comfortable and safe. "Take your time," he said softly when she stumbled over a hidden rock. His voice was calm, steady, and surprisingly reassuring. Naya had feared a harsh, commanding man, but Elias' quiet patience gave her a small sense of relief. She could sense that he was strong, but he did not need to prove it through force. Instead, he seemed to measure his strength with care and respect. During the first few days, Naya felt a deep loneliness. The world outside her village was vast and unfamiliar, and she missed her mother's gentle hands and her father's presence, even though he had caused her this journey. She had to rely on Elias more than she wanted, but she discovered that he was not unkind. He spoke to her about simple things, the sound of the river, the smell of wild herbs, and the rhythm of the horses. He asked questions about her life, her village, and her family. Naya responded cautiously at first, unsure if she could trust this stranger who was now her husband. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of red and orange she could not see but could feel in the warmth on her skin, they stopped by a small stream to rest. Naya reached out to feel the water's flow, amazed at its cool touch and the way it moved past her fingers. Elias watched silently, giving her space but staying near. "It's strong," he said. "It always keeps moving, no matter what." Naya smiled faintly, sensing the deeper meaning in his words. Life would keep moving, and she had no choice but to keep moving with it. As they traveled further, Naya began to notice subtle aspects of Elias' personality. He was quiet but not cold. He rarely raised his voice, and when he did, it was never harsh. He respected her space and let her explore the surroundings, even though she could not see. He guided her with gentle words instead of commands. Naya realized that he had learned patience from experience, and that his strength was not only physical but also in the way he treated others. At night, they camped under the stars, though Naya could not see them. She listened to the sounds of the night, the whispering wind, the creaking of the horse tethered nearby, and the soft breathing of Elias beside her. He spoke of his life, of the plains he had traveled, and of the people he had met. Naya listened intently, learning about a world far beyond her village. She felt both excitement and fear. Excitement because the world was bigger than she had ever imagined, fear because it was also full of unknown dangers. One day, while crossing a dry, rocky pass, Naya lost her balance and nearly fell. Elias caught her arm just in time. "Careful," he said gently. "You must feel the ground before stepping." "Listen to it." Naya nodded, feeling the strength of his hand and the reassurance in his voice. She realized that this journey would test her in ways she had never expected. She had survived blindness and the limitations it imposed, but now she had to survive a new world, a world that was open, harsh, and sometimes unforgiving. Despite the challenges, Naya discovered moments of beauty. She could feel the softness of the grass under her fingers, the warmth of the sun on her back, and the delicate flutter of birds landing nearby. She learned to distinguish between the sounds of different animals and to sense changes in the weather before they arrived. Every day, she grew more confident in her ability to navigate the world without sight. She learned that her blindness was not a weakness but a gift, allowing her to experience life in a unique and profound way. Elias noticed her growing independence. He began to trust her more, letting her take the lead when possible. He would occasionally guide her with a soft touch or a quiet word, but mostly he allowed her to learn on her own. Naya appreciated this. She felt a small measure of freedom, even within the constraints of a journey she had not chosen. She began to respect Elias, seeing that his strength was not in dominating her but in supporting her. One afternoon, as they rested near a small grove of trees, Naya reached out to touch the rough bark of an old oak. She felt its deep grooves and sturdy trunk, imagining the life it had seen over the years. Elias watched her quietly, then said, "You are brave, Naya." Not many would have made it this far. Naya felt a mixture of pride and humility. She had been afraid, yes, but she had also faced every challenge with determination. She realized that bravery was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. The days grew longer and the terrain became more difficult. They crossed wide plains, climbed small hills, and navigated narrow trails along cliffs. Naya's senses became sharper. She could hear the faintest rustle of leaves, smell the distant presence of water, and sense the direction of the wind. She learned to trust herself and her instincts more than ever. Elias' presence was a steady support, but Naya discovered that her own strength was what truly carried her forward. During the journey, they also encountered other travelers, hunters, traders, and cowboys moving cattle across the plains. Naya listened carefully to their voices, learning about the wider world and its dangers. Some were kind, offering water or advice, while others were brusque or suspicious. Each encounter taught her something new about people and about herself. She realized that the world was complex, full of both kindness and cruelty, and that she would need wisdom and courage to navigate it. As the sun set on the third week of their journey, they finally approached the edge of Elias' homestead. Naya felt a mix of relief, apprehension, and curiosity. She could hear the distant sounds of animals, the creak of the gate, and the faint noise of tools being used. This was the place she would call home, at least for now. She did not know what to expect, but she felt a strange sense of anticipation. She had survived the journey, faced her fears, and learned to trust herself and, in small ways, the man she had been forced to marry. That night before sleeping in the new home, Naya sat quietly and listened to the wind rustling through the open plains. She thought of her village, her family, and the life she had left behind. She thought of her mother's gentle hands and her father's firm voice. She realized that though her father had forced her into this marriage, the journey itself had taught her something valuable. She was stronger than anyone had imagined, and she had the ability to face the unknown. Elias noticed her quiet reflection and spoke softly. "You are different from anyone I've met, Naya. You face life with courage. I will do my best to help you in this new home." Naya felt a strange warmth at his words. Though she could not yet see him, she sensed sincerity and care. For the first time, she considered that this marriage might not only be a burden, but could also offer her a chance to grow, to learn, and perhaps even to find a companion in a world she had never imagined. The next morning, Naya awoke to the sounds of the homestead. She heard the lowing of cattle, the clatter of tools, and the soft footfalls of Elias moving about. Though she could not see, she felt the rhythms of this new life beginning to take shape. She realized that the journey was only the beginning, that challenges would continue, and that her courage and determination would be tested again. But Naya also felt a spark of hope. She had survived the journey, faced fears she had never known, and learned to trust herself in a world that seemed frightening and unfamiliar. She had discovered that her blindness did not define her, and that even in the face of forced circumstances, she could carve a path for herself. The plains stretched endlessly around her, full of both danger and possibility, and Naya knew she would face them with strength, patience, and an open heart. The journey had changed her, and though she could not see, she felt ready for what was to come. She was a young, blind Apache woman, far from her village, facing a life she had not chosen. But within her lived a courage that no one could take away. And as she listened to the wind whisper through the open plains, she knew that her story was only beginning. Life at Elias' homestead was nothing like Naya had imagined. The wide open plains stretched endlessly, dotted with grazing cattle, low wooden fences, and scattered barns. The sun burned hotter here than in her village, and the wind carried the scent of hay, dust, and animals. Naya could not see, but she could feel the world in ways she never had before. Every sound, smell, and touch became part of her new reality. She listened carefully to the low mooing of the cattle, the clatter of tools, and the creaking of the barn doors. These sounds became guides, helping her understand the rhythms of this unfamiliar life. At first, Naya felt completely out of place. She had been forced into this new home, far from everything she had known. She struggled to navigate the wide, open spaces, to understand the chores required of her, and to adjust to a man she barely knew. Elias was patient, but he had his own routines and responsibilities, and he expected Naya to learn quickly. She stumbled often, sometimes tripping over fences or misjudging distances, but she refused to give up. Her fingers memorized the textures of walls, railings, and tools. She learned the sound of the cattle moving, the patterns of the wind, and the changes in the ground beneath her feet. Slowly, the homestead began to make sense to her. Elias, for his part, was cautious. He had not married Naya expecting to care for someone blind, but he respected her courage. He taught her to perform chores carefully, using her senses to guide her movements. She learned to feed the animals, carry buckets of water, and gather firewood. Each task was a challenge, but Naya discovered that she could adapt if she paid attention. Elias never scolded her harshly. Instead, he guided her with quiet instructions and gentle corrections. Slowly, a bond began to form between them, though it was still fragile and uncertain. Even as she learned, Naya felt a sense of isolation. She missed her village, her mother's soft voice, and the familiar faces of her friends. Nights were especially lonely. The homestead was quiet, except for the occasional rustle of animals and the distant howl of a coyote. Naya would sit alone by the fire, feeling the warmth on her skin, and think about her past. She remembered the village, the stories by the fire, and the laughter of children playing nearby. Her heart ached, but she also realized that she could not change her situation. The life she had left behind was gone, and she had to find a way to survive and even thrive in this new world. One evening, as she was gathering water from the well, Naya noticed how carefully Elias worked with the cattle. He spoke to them softly, guiding them without force, and moved among them with ease. Though she could not see, she could sense his calm confidence. For the first time, Nea felt a flicker of respect and curiosity about him. Perhaps he was not the harsh, uncaring man she had feared. Perhaps there was more to him than she had realized. Days turned into weeks, and Nea's skills improved. She learned to distinguish the sounds of different animals, to sense when a fence was loose, and to anticipate the weather by listening to the wind. She discovered that the homestead was full of small surprises: a soft patch of grass near the barn, the gentle brush of a horse's mane, and the sweet scent of wildflowers growing by the stream. These little moments brought her joy and reminded her that life could still hold beauty, even in circumstances she had not chosen. Elias noticed her growing confidence. He began to involve her in decisions about the homestead, asking her opinions about how to arrange supplies or when to move the cattle. At first, Nea hesitated, unsure if she had the knowledge or experience to contribute. But Elias encouraged her, and she slowly realized that her instincts and careful attention to details could make a difference. She began to feel a sense of accomplishment and pride, knowing that she was not just surviving but also contributing to the life they shared. Despite this progress, challenges remained. Nea often felt frustrated by her limitations. She wished she could see the vast plains, the cattle, and the barns that surrounded her. She wanted to understand Elias' expressions, to know when he was happy or upset, and to share in his thoughts more fully. Sometimes she felt trapped by her blindness, unable to fully participate in the life around her. She would sit quietly, listening to the wind and the sounds of the homestead, wondering what it would be like to see and fully experience the world. One afternoon, while tending to the chickens, Nea overheard a conversation between Elias and one of his neighbors. She could not see the expressions on their faces, but the tension in their voices was clear. They spoke of her father, of promises made, and of a reward given for her marriage. Nea's heart sank. She realized that her father had made the decision for reasons that had nothing to do with her happiness. He had treated her life as a transaction, and she felt a surge of anger and betrayal. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel the depth of her resentment. Yet even in her anger, Nea recognized a truth. She could not change the past, and she could not control her father's actions. What she could control was her present and her future. She began to focus on what she could do to survive, to learn, and to make the homestead a place where she could live with dignity. She refused to let bitterness consume her. Instead, she channeled her energy into mastering her environment, learning the routines, and understanding the rhythms of the homestead. Elias, unaware of her overhearing, continued to treat her with patience and respect. Over time, Nea began to see glimpses of his character that surprised her. He was not cruel or selfish. He was disciplined, responsible, and deeply connected to the land he worked. Though he had agreed to the marriage for reasons that included practical benefits, he was willing to treat her with care and to help her adapt. Nea began to feel a cautious trust, realizing that not all men were harsh or unkind, and that perhaps Elias could become a companion she could respect. Evenings became times of reflection for Nea. She would sit by the fire, listening to the sounds of the homestead, feeling the warmth of the flames, and thinking about her journey. She remembered her village, her family, and the life she had known, but she also acknowledged the life she was now building. Each small accomplishment, the way she guided herself through the barns, the way she fed the animals, the way she learned to anticipate the weather, became a source of pride. She realized that her blindness had not prevented her from becoming strong, resourceful, and capable. Over time, Nea also discovered moments of connection with Elias. Though they had started as strangers bound by obligation, small gestures began to bridge the gap between them. Elias would hand her tools without speaking, guide her gently through difficult paths, and offer encouragement when she struggled. Nea noticed these acts of care and began to appreciate them. She realized that while their relationship had started as a forced arrangement, there was potential for mutual respect and understanding. One day, a sudden storm swept across the plains. The wind howled, and rain began to fall in heavy sheets. Nea could not see the storm, but she felt its power in the shaking of the barns, the movement of the cattle, and the slap of rain against the ground. Elias worked quickly to secure the animals and protect the homestead. Nea followed his instructions, using her senses to help guide the cattle and assist in whatever tasks she could manage. By the end of the storm, she felt a sense of accomplishment. She had faced danger and chaos, and she had contributed to the safety of the homestead. In those moments, Nea began to see the world differently. She realized that life at the homestead, though challenging, was teaching her skills, resilience, and independence. She understood that her experiences, both in the village and on this new land, had shaped her into someone capable of facing hardships and finding her own way. The homestead was no longer just a place of confinement. It was a place of growth, learning, and possibility. By the end of the first season at the homestead, Nea had transformed in ways even she could not have imagined. She had learned to navigate the land, care for the animals, and understand the rhythms of daily life. She had discovered the depth of her own courage and resilience. She had begun to trust Elias, not blindly, but cautiously, noticing his quiet acts of kindness and his steady presence. And most importantly, she had started to feel that she had a place in this new world, even if it was not the one she had chosen. Nea's days were now filled with work, learning, and small victories. She understood that challenges would continue, that her blindness would still limit her in some ways, and that she would need to rely on patience, instinct, and courage. But she also knew that she was stronger than she had realized. She had survived her father's decision, the long journey, and the adjustment to a new life. She had begun to see the possibilities in her situation and to imagine a future that was not entirely dictated by others. And so Nea's life at the homestead continued, a mixture of hardship and discovery, fear and courage, resentment and respect. Each day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new opportunities to grow. Though she had been forced into this life, she was learning to claim it for herself, finding strength in her independence and beginning to understand the man she had been married to. The plains stretched endlessly around her, filled with danger, beauty, and possibility, and Nea faced them with determination, patience, and a growing sense of hope. Life at the homestead had taught Nea much, but nothing prepared her for what came next. One morning, she woke feeling a strange warmth in her eyes and a clarity she had never known. Over the past month, she had noticed subtle changes, shadows seeming different, light appearing in unexpected ways, and the faintest hint of shapes. But she had dismissed them as tricks of the wind and the sun. Now it was undeniable. Something in her eyes had changed. She could see, at first the world overwhelmed her. The plains stretched endlessly with golden grass shimmering under the sun. The barns, the fences, the cattle, they were all visible now, not just sensed or imagined. The sky, a vast dome above, was painted in the softest blue, dotted with clouds drifting lazily. She could see Elias for the first time, standing near the barn with a worried expression. His hair was sun-bleached, his face tanned and lined from hard work, and his eyes held a quiet concern that made her heart skip. Nea's first reaction was fear. She had always relied on her other senses, and now they seemed both useful and insufficient. The world looked bigger, sharper, and more complex. Her mind tried to adjust, to understand distances, shapes, and colors, but every step felt strange and new. She reached out, touching the rough wood of the barn, and realized that things she had memorized by feel now had faces and forms she could see. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing a world she had only sensed before. Elias approached carefully, unsure how Nea would react. "Can you see?" he asked gently. His voice carried a mixture of hope and caution, as though he feared startling her. Nea nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes. I can see," she whispered. Her voice trembled with wonder, relief, and a touch of disbelief. She had never imagined that she would witness the world in this way. The first days of her sight were both joyous and confusing. Nea discovered the colors of the grass, the brightness of the sun, and the depth of the sky. She could see the animals she had cared for, cattle, chickens, and horses, with all their shapes and movements. She noticed details she had never imagined. The curve of a horse's ear, the flick of a cow's tail, the way sunlight reflected on a stream. Everything was new, and everything demanded attention. With her sight came a new perspective on Elias. She could now see his expressions, the lines on his face, and the kindness in his eyes. She noticed the way his hands moved as he worked, the way he treated the animals with care, and the subtle ways he had supported her without making her feel weak or dependent. Seeing him for the first time, Nea felt a mixture of surprise, gratitude, and a growing sense of trust. She realized that he had been more patient and understanding than she had ever imagined. Yet with joy came challenges. The world was sharper and more vivid, but it also revealed hardships she had never seen. The homestead was vast, and the distances that she had navigated by touch and sound now required her to learn new ways to move confidently. The sun could burn her skin, and shadows could confuse her steps. She discovered obstacles she had never felt before: the uneven ground, the sudden rise of hills, and the unpredictable movements of animals. Each day became a lesson, not just in seeing but in understanding how to act in a world that was now visible. Despite the challenges, Nea's excitement could not be contained. She explored the homestead with new curiosity, running her fingers over familiar objects while seeing them at the same time. She marveled at the colors of the fields, the patterns of the sky, and the delicate beauty of flowers she had touched but never seen. Each discovery filled her with awe and gratitude. The world was vast and unpredictable, but it was also full of beauty she had never known. Elias watched her transformation with quiet satisfaction. He had known this moment might come, but seeing Nea react with wonder and excitement was moving. He could see the way her face lit up, the joy in her voice, and the careful attention in her movements. He realized that her courage had never been diminished by her blindness. It had only been shaped by it. Now, with sight restored, her strength and resilience shone even more brightly. As Nea adjusted to her vision, she began to notice details about the homestead and Elias that had previously escaped her. She saw the rough hands that guided the cattle, the careful lines of fences that Elias had built, and the small imperfections in the barn that she could now observe. She noticed the weathered wood, the worn paths, and the signs of a life lived with care and labor. Elias' presence became clearer to her in a way that touched her deeply. She could see not only his actions, but also the thought, effort, and patience behind them. One afternoon, as she walked through the fields, Nea reflected on her journey. She thought of her village, her family, and the life she had left behind. She thought of her father's decision, the long journey, and the challenges she had faced. And now she could see the consequences of those choices: the harshness of the land, the kindness of Elias, and the possibilities that stretched before her. She realized that life was unpredictable, full of obstacles and surprises, but that she had the power to face it and shape her own path. With sight, Nea also began to understand the emotional landscape around her. She noticed the subtle expressions on Elias' face: concern, patience, pride, and occasional frustration. She realized that he, too, had struggles and a life shaped by his own challenges. She began to feel empathy and connection, recognizing that their relationship could grow beyond obligation into something deeper. She saw the quiet strength that had guided her through the journey and the home, and she began to feel respect, gratitude, and a budding sense of companionship. Nea also started to notice the small joys of the homestead in new ways. The sunlight glinting on the stream, the patterns of leaves moving in the wind, the way the animals interacted, all these details became part of her world. She discovered that her blindness had given her an appreciation for these things in a different way, but now, with sight, she could fully experience them. Every day became an adventure, a chance to learn, explore, and connect with her surroundings. With her vision restored, Nea also faced new emotions about her father. She remembered the conversation she had overheard about promises and rewards. Seeing Elias clearly, she realized that her father's decision had been selfish, but it had also set her on a path that allowed her to discover her own strength. She no longer felt trapped by his choice. Instead, she felt empowered. She could see the world, understand it, and make her own decisions. The anger and resentment she had carried began to transform into clarity and resolve. As weeks passed, Nea grew more confident. She could now move through the homestead without hesitation, anticipate the needs of the animals, and assist Elias more effectively. She discovered talents she had never known: guiding the cattle with her voice and gestures, riding horses with skill, and recognizing patterns in the land that allowed her to work efficiently. Her confidence inspired Elias as well. He began to treat her not only as his wife, but as a capable partner in the work of the homestead. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Nea and Elias stood together on a small hill overlooking the fields. Nea marveled at the view: the rolling plains, the scattered barns, and the distant mountains. She realized that the world was vast, full of beauty, and full of challenges. She had learned to navigate it with courage, patience, and determination. And now, with sight restored, she could fully experience it, appreciate it, and shape her own life within it. Nea turned to Elias, seeing him for the first time not just as a husband imposed upon her, but as a man who had guided her, supported her, and respected her along the way. She felt gratitude, respect, and a quiet sense of connection. For the first time, she understood that life, even when forced upon her, could hold moments of kindness, understanding, and even companionship. That night, as she lay in the homestead, Nea reflected on everything she had experienced. She had been blind, forced into a marriage, and taken far from the life she knew. She had faced fear, loneliness, and uncertainty, yet she had survived, adapted, and discovered strength within herself. Now, with her vision restored, she saw the world in all its complexity and beauty. She understood Elias, the homestead, and the land in ways she could never have imagined. And she realized that, despite everything, she had found a sense of freedom, clarity, and possibility. Nea knew that challenges would continue. The plains were vast and sometimes harsh, and life at the homestead demanded strength and resilience every day. But she also knew that she could face them, that she could navigate her world with courage, and that she could build a life on her own terms. Her journey had been difficult, but it had taught her the power of patience, the importance of observation, and the value of trust. And as she looked out at the endless plains under the setting sun, Nea felt a quiet joy. She had seen the world, she had faced her fears, and she had begun to understand the man she had married. She realized that her story, though unexpected, was filled with lessons, growth, and the possibility of something beautiful. She had been blind, both in body and in life, but now her vision and her heart were wide open. With her sight fully restored, Nea began to feel a freedom she had never known. The world was no longer something she sensed through sound and touch alone. She could see the colors, shapes, and beauty around her. The plains stretched endlessly, golden grass swaying in the wind, cattle moving slowly in the distance, and the sky above painted in a brilliant, endless blue. The homestead no longer felt foreign. It felt like a place she could belong to, a place where she could shape her own life. Nea's days were now filled with exploration and learning. She walked through the fields with confidence, noticing details she had never imagined: the curve of a tree branch, the shimmer of a stream, the way sunlight danced across the barn roof. She began to guide the cattle with ease, recognizing their shapes and movements instantly. She rode horses with skill, feeling their muscles beneath her as she had always imagined, but now seeing every motion with clarity. Each day brought new discoveries, new challenges, and new opportunities for her to grow. Elias watched her with quiet admiration. The man she had first feared now seemed different in her eyes, not only because she could see him, but because she could understand him better. He was strong, patient, and kind in ways that could not be measured simply by words. He respected her abilities and encouraged her independence, never treating her as weak or incapable. Over time, their relationship deepened. It was no longer just a forced arrangement. It became a partnership built on trust, understanding, and mutual respect. Nea began to feel warmth and companionship that she had never expected. Despite her growing confidence, Nea never forgot the hardships that had brought her here. She remembered her father's decision, made for his own gain, and the long journey to the homestead. She thought of the loneliness she had felt, the fear of the unknown, and the challenges she had faced. But those memories no longer brought anger or despair. Instead, they reminded her of her strength, her resilience, and her ability to overcome obstacles. She realized that while she could not change the past, she could shape her future. One day, Nea decided to explore the surrounding land beyond the homestead. She walked through hills and streams, feeling the sun on her skin and the wind in her hair. Every step was a discovery, a chance to learn more about the world she now could see. She noticed wildflowers of colors she had never imagined, purples, yellows, and reds, and felt a deep sense of joy. She could see the mountains in the distance, the rivers winding through the plains, and the vast sky stretching endlessly above. The world was vast, beautiful, and full of possibilities. During her exploration, Nea also reflected on her personal growth. She had learned to navigate the homestead, care for the animals, and understand the rhythms of life on the plains. She had learned to trust herself, to rely on her instincts, and to recognize her own strengths. She had learned patience, resilience, and courage. Most importantly, she had learned that she was capable of creating her own path, even in a world that sometimes felt harsh and unforgiving. As she returned to the homestead, Naya began to think about her relationship with Elias. She realized that while he had not chosen her for love initially, he had shown care, patience, and respect that went beyond obligation. She appreciated his quiet strength, his work ethic, and his willingness to support her. Slowly, she began to see him not only as a husband, but as a companion, someone who could share life's challenges and joys with her. Their bond deepened, rooted in trust and mutual respect rather than fear or obligation. Naya also began to take control of her life in other ways. She learned to manage the homestead efficiently, organizing chores, guiding workers when needed, and making decisions about planting, harvesting, and caring for the animals. Her confidence grew with each task she completed successfully. She realized that she was no longer a passive participant in life. She was an active, capable woman, shaping her own destiny. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Naya stood on a small hill overlooking the homestead and the vast plains beyond. She felt the wind on her face, smelled the sweet grass, and listened to the distant sounds of animals returning to their pens. She reflected on her journey, from the young blind girl in the village to the woman who could see, navigate, and thrive in a world she had once feared. She understood that life had brought her to this place not to limit her, but to reveal her strength and potential. With her newfound confidence, Naya decided to write to her father. She told him about her life, her achievements, and the lessons she had learned. She did not write in anger but in clarity, explaining that while his decisions had forced her into a difficult path, she had survived, adapted, and grown stronger. She expressed her independence and made it clear that she would no longer be controlled by him. Sending the letter was a symbolic act, a way to reclaim her life and assert her freedom. Naya's relationship with the homestead and the land also transformed. She felt a deep connection to the plains, the animals, and the natural rhythms of life. She could sense the changing seasons, anticipate the weather, and guide the cattle through challenging terrain. She began to see patterns in nature, understanding how to work with the land rather than against it. This knowledge gave her confidence and a sense of belonging she had never known in her village. As the months passed, Naya and Elias continued to build their life together. They worked side by side, sharing responsibilities and supporting each other. They laughed together, solved problems together, and faced challenges as a team. Naya discovered that companionship could grow from respect, understanding, and shared experience, even when it began in unexpected ways. She felt a sense of partnership that was deeper than she had imagined, and she began to envision a future filled with possibility. Naya also began to mentor others in the homestead and surrounding area. She shared her knowledge of the land, animals, and survival skills with younger women and children. She taught them how to navigate the plains, care for animals, and appreciate the beauty and challenges of the natural world. In doing so, she felt a sense of purpose and fulfillment. Her life was no longer defined by limitations or obligations imposed by others. It was defined by her choices, her skills, and her contributions. One crisp morning, Naya stood at the edge of the homestead, looking out at the endless plains. She felt the warmth of the sun on her face and the gentle touch of the wind on her hair. She saw the mountains in the distance, the streams winding through the fields and the cattle grazing peacefully. For the first time in her life, she felt completely free. She could see the world, navigate it with confidence, and shape her own path. She had faced fear, hardship, and uncertainty, but she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more capable than she had ever imagined. In that moment, Naya understood the full meaning of freedom. It was not just the absence of fear or limitation. It was the ability to see clearly, act decisively, and choose one's own path. She realized that her blindness, her father's decision, and the challenges of the journey had all contributed to the strength and wisdom she now possessed. She felt gratitude for the lessons, resilience for the hardships, and hope for the future she could create. Naya turned to Elias, who stood quietly beside her. She could see the respect and admiration in his eyes, and she felt a deep sense of connection. They had started their journey as strangers bound by obligation, but now they were partners, companions, and equals. Naya realized that life, even when unexpected and difficult, could bring moments of beauty, understanding, and love. She felt a sense of peace and contentment she had never known before. The plains stretched endlessly around them, filled with light, color, and life. Nea felt a quiet joy, knowing that she had claimed her freedom, embraced her strength, and built a life she could be proud of. She had transformed from a young blind girl forced into a marriage to a woman who could see, navigate, and thrive in the world. Her story was one of resilience, courage, and discovery, a journey that had led her to unexpected freedom and the realization of her own potential. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the fields, Nea stood tall, breathing deeply and feeling the world around her. She had faced every challenge with courage, learned every lesson with patience, and discovered every possibility with hope. She knew that the future was hers to shape, and she was ready. She had opened her eyes and found a life she could truly call her own.